Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of First Samuel. Yesterday, when we left off First Samuel chapter 10, right at the end, when Samuel displayed the entire ritual of selecting by lots, first the tribe, and then the clan and family, and within the family, the lot for Saul was picked from the lot. Now, unfortunately, not everyone was happy with the choice of God. In verse 26, we see that there are a number of valiant men whose hearts God had reached out and touched them or struck them that they are to serve Saul. And so there are people who are positively led. But the last part is what I want to draw your attention to because we will come back to them in today's chapter 11. In verse 27, there are worthless men. Worthless men are people who are good for nothing. Now, in every society, in every community, it appears that there are people who are just antagonists for the sake of being antagonizing, and perhaps they don't see any value of Saul. Why Saul? Why not somebody else? And they don't see how God played that role. And so, even though Samuel was the one who coordinated, and even though Samuel was the one who spoke on behalf of God, thus says the Lord, they could not accept Saul. And so, because of that, they despised him, did not bring any present. That in that sense, they dishonored the king. They couldn't be bothered that he is king. He could be anyone for that matter. And so God's choice was frowned upon, so to speak, by these men. And so I just want to point out to you that there are people who are detractors from this instance. Let's go on to chapter 11. In chapter 11, verse 1, the narrative moves to an incident. And so the narrative uses a particular incident that is to stir the entire nation towards Saul. Because they were saying, what good is Saul? What can he do? How can he save us from all these oppression? And so they thought nothing of Saul. And so chapter 11 unveils the narrative so that the people can see that God is truly with Saul. Now, it begins with Nahash. Nahash was an Ammonite. Now, it's important for us to realize with an Ammonite, Ammonites are not supposed to join the congregation of God. So I like to point your attention to this key passage, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 23. And in verse 3, you see that two types of people who are not supposed to be entering into the congregation of God. First, the Ammonite. And the second is the Moabite. And generally, these are the men who are not supposed to be part of the congregation of God, and they don't join the Israelites in following God's Torah. Now, what happened is that Nahash is a general, and he came up and besieged Yabesh Gilead. Now, Yabesh Gilead is a town on the, how should we say? It would be on the, well, perhaps the rocky region of Gilead, right? Perhaps the rocky region of Gilead. by the Jordan River. Now, what happened is that the Ammonite is on the eastern shore, and they came to that boundary town of Yabesh Gilead, which is possibly across the river from the Ammonites. And the the encampment, I guess the idea is siege. It is a good word, actually. Besiege is a good word, because the idea here is if you have a town, what they do is that they would camp around the town. And this is a siege, right? A siege. The old days, what they do is that they would camp around the town so that you can't come out and nobody can come in. And this is the way that they did their warfare. So ancient warfare has been like this for a long time. Now, there is a very strange phrase, and it's somewhat difficult to express. And the men of Yabesh said to Nahash, they are trying to have a peace treaty. So make a covenant with us literally means a peace treaty. And in all treaties, you need to understand that this treaty will supersede all other agreements with the Ammonites. And they are saying, if you make a covenant with us, we will serve you, meaning we will work for you. We will listen to you. So don't come in and kill us. Now, verse 2 is the strange covenant. Nahash, the Ammonite, said to them, I will make with you on this condition. The condition, well, the idea here is the word condition um, is not there, but it is implied, right? It's implied. There is something that they must do before Nahash would cut a covenant with them. And this means, and his requirement is really strange. His requirement is that I will gorge out the right eye of every one of you. Thus, I will make it a reproach on all Israel. Jabesh Gilead is likely the Manasseh camp. Uh, and and this phrase is strange, as I had mentioned, because why would Nahash the Ammonite want a group of people who would be a one-eyed jack? So literally speaking, this word is to dig out, dig out. And he wants to dig out the right eye, the right hand side, right hand side of every one of you. And the reproach, the idea of a reproach here would be a scorn, a taunt, a shame, a disgrace. Now, in the literal sense, as I've seen how the Jews would look at this is the literal meaning of digging somebody's eye out seems to be a bit chaotic, very confusing, because there is no particular reason Nahash, the Ammonite, would ever want a group of people that has half sight. The alternative explanation, and so I'll just share this with you, is to bring out the Torah to be destroyed. And the intent is really very much to, I guess, to negate Deuteronomy chapter 23, right? Chapter 23, verse 3. And so it is something that we need to think of it, because taking out the right eye of everyone, and by everyone, uh, probably means everyone in the entire Yabesh Gilead. So there are some challenges to an understanding of verse 2. If you take it literally, then they will want the right eye of everyone. And military speaking, some may say that, well, you can't fight. But uh, digging out the eye, or it may not be a proper way, I guess. You might as well chop off the hand or kill them all. But it is quite unusual, right? It's quite an unusual request. And so the more figurative approach the Jews took was with regards to the Torah, and it's more of a metaphorical. I want to take your eye, and the eye represents uh, the guide to the community. That would be one aspect of understanding it. Verse 3 says here, the elders of Yabesh. Now understand, whenever you see this word like this, the elders, these are the older people, the elder in terms of age, and not only in terms of age. Elders are old from age, and from here they are chosen to lead the clan. And so when we talk about elders, it's a very oriental concept of an elder. It is not looking at the entire group of people and picking a few people to be leaders and then calling them elder. Because the word elder is not a title. The word elder literally means you're old. And then amongst the older people, they will pick a few to lead because they are the wiser ones of them and who are capable of leading. So you will never find a young man becoming an elder, because it doesn't befit the word itself. So understand that in the Hebrew concept is very oriental as well. And so the idea here would be the ones who are older and the ones who are leading. And they said, well, let us alone. The idea of let us alone is this word here, let us alone, is to relax. That's the idea of relax. Withdraw is another word. Withdraw from us for 7 days. Now, in these 7 days, we would send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. If no one deliver us, we will come out to you. And this means that they will surrender. It's a very interesting narrative. And so 7 days, and you notice the 7 has been used quite often. We read in chapter 10, and Samuel tells Saul, wait for me in Gilead for 7 days. And 7 days is a period of testing, a more complete period, perhaps from a symbolic significance. And so it says, give us 7 days, and we are going to send messengers. The word messengers is malak, which is usually translated as angels. And so in this case, by context, these are not spiritual beings. These are literally people from Yabesh Gilead, that they would send everywhere to all the boundary of Israel, to every of the tribes. If no one comes to help, now this what help is, cause to liberate, cause to save, cause to liberate, cause to deliver. And so the word deliver is to save, and to save from the hands of Nahash the Ammonite. If nobody comes to defend us, to rescue us, then we will surrender to you. We will come out to you. But the idea of withdrawal means from the siege, they are to go away and give them time to go out 7 days. And then they will decide whether they will surrender or not. Now we read verse 4. In verse 4, the messengers, the Malach, came to Gibeah of Saul. Now remember, Saul went back to his home, right? At the end of chapter 10, you find that he actually went back to Gibeah 10, at the end of verse 10. And so the messengers also came to Saul and spoke these words in the hearing of the people. And so this was said in public. The words in the hearing of the people means in the ear, in the ears of the people. So literally, they are all there listening to the Malach, the messengers. And all the people lifted their voices and wept. Lifted up their voices means they are in a dismay that one of their tribes are being oppressed, surrounded by Nahash the Ammonite. And they weep. They weep and they wail. They shed tears. And this is really bemoaning the situation, that this is not supposed to be. Not supposed to be. And in verse 5, it continues. It says, now behold, Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen. The idea of the field behind the oxen literally means the oxen is returning. And Saul is following behind. So you have the oxen and Saul is behind them. And so that's where they are going back to the city of Gibeah. And they saw Saul from afar and he said, what is the matter with the people that they weep? Why are all these people weeping? And so they related to him the words of the men of Jabesh. Now, interestingly, you find that when they came to say and speak to Saul, Saul wasn't there. They were actually talking to the ears of the people. They were announcing to the people. Maybe they were on a higher platform and in the ancient times, they don't have internet, they don't print newspapers, they don't send emails. They come and bring vocal or audio messages. And so in the hearing of everyone, they described what was happening. And so these people who were crying related to him the davar, the words, the davar, the matters, right? The issues of the men of Jabesh and what's happened to them. Carry on to verse 6. This other expression, the Spirit of God came upon Saul mightily when he heard these words, and he became very angry. Now we need to actually break this down a little bit. The Spirit of God is literally the wind of God, which depicts the character of God. And so suddenly, uh, the 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 character or the wind of God came upon, and upon means above, not in, right? Mightily, very similar to chapter 10, but in this case, the Spirit of God or the wind of God displayed the character of God. And the character of God was anger. And so he became very angry. This really depicts that God was angry, and the wind of God came upon Saul in a mighty manner when he heard these words, and he displayed the character of God to be angry, to be hot of nose. This is what we are seeing, that the wind of God, the character of God was shown in Saul. Verse 7, he took a yoke of oxen. Now, this idea of a yoke of oxen is probably a team or a pair. Usually a pair, because you have a yoke that put on two oxen to plow. Then cut them in pieces, send them throughout the territory of Israel by the hand of the messenger. So the messengers of Yabesh, Gilead, were to take these pieces and understand this is a very cultural behavior. If you read the end of the book of Judges, the Levi chopped up the wife into 11 pieces to send it out to all 11 tribes. And this is the same idea. Cut out the oxen into 11 pieces, 12 pieces, I would say, throughout the borders of Israel by hand. And he says this is a call to arms, right? A call to arms. Whoever does not come out after Saul and after Samuel, the word after is behind. What does this mean? If you have this concept, you have Saul and you have Samuel, and where they are going, you are coming behind. These people are coming behind. That's what it means. That's what it means. That as this call goes out, you are to come following behind Saul and Samuel. That if you don't, what was done to the oxen will be done to you. What does that mean? It means that if you don't come out, this whole idea of cut them in pieces, this is one word, right? This is one word. Cut out in pieces, to dismember. And in our colloquial, get chopped up. That's what it means. This is a warning to all those who would not follow after Saul and Samuel. And when the people heard this, the dread of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out as one man. Now, let's break this out a little bit. What is the dread of the Lord? This is pachad. This is the terror. The terror. This is the terror of God. And the terror of God means these people, when they hear of this, they are afraid. And not because of Saul and Samuel, they were afraid of God. And that same terror of God, the terror that rightfully belongs to God. You can be afraid of anyone, but the kind of fear that is for God Himself is the same thing that they are shaking in their pants, because the Lord is a consuming fire, and so they are to fear God. And so this is the same terror that belongs to God, that when they think of it as God's call, the people became so terrified, and they all came out as one man, right? This is Ish Echad. That is one. They are behaving as one person, meaning they are all conducting themselves and listening to Saul, as rightfully Saul being the head, and they are all just obeying as, although they are many in number, as one single unified mind, right? One unified mind, which means that whatever is instructed, they will do. Now, verse 8 says that he numbered them in Bedzek, uh, um, or Badzek. Badzek. Now, uh, Badzek also means, uh, uh, I guess this has to do with counting, right? With counting. Badzek has something to do with counting in verse 8. And what it means is very much to use pebbles to count. Now, this is one particular aspect of numbering, where each of them, when they came to Saul, and this is Saul numbering, they don't count heads, they count pebbles, right? They count pebbles. And the sons of Israel were 300,000, and that's a lot of men. And the men of Judah was at least 30,000, right? At least 30,000. And what does it mean? It means, if you look at the Hebrew numbers, this is 3,000 of sorry, it is 30 of 1,000. In 300,000, it would be 3 of 100 of 1,000. That's how the Hebrew numbers are calculated. So this one will give you an idea that they don't have numbers like 300,000 or 30,000. They would have numbers like these. It would break down into 3 sets of numbers. So in this case, 3 of 100 of 1,000 makes up 300,000. 30 of 1,000 makes up 30,000. And so you have quite a number of people when they were counting pebbles, right? They were counting the pebbles. Verse 9, they said to the messengers who had come, "In this way you shall say to the men of Yabesh Gilead." So it says, tomorrow, literally next day, by the time the sun is hot. What does that mean? By the time the sun is hot. This word hot literally means to be, well, I guess to be hot is a good word. And it's an indication of midday, right? An indication of midday. By the time the sun is right up there. Then this will all be over. The idea here would be you will have deliverance. You will be saved. And so the time, and it's given as a prediction, by midday, there will be salvation. Now, understand, salvation is deliverance. It is liberation. All right, these are the words that's being used here. And so the messengers went and told the men of Yabesh, and they were glad. The word glad is that they were rejoicing. They were rejoicing. They were very happy. Right? They were very happy. I guess you could use many of the words. They were very cheerful. They were merry. Very good words, because this is the good news. This is the good news. The good news is they are going to be saved by midday. And so these are very, very, very specific predictions. Verse 10, then the men of Yabesh said to who? Said to Nahash, right? Said to Nahash. Says, tomorrow we will come out to you and we will surrender. This is what it means, right? We will surrender. And it says, and you may do to us whatever seems good to you. This word here is good in your eyes. And basically, this is very much to tell them one more day, next day, we will surrender. And when the time comes, whatever you want, just do it. Now, understand, this is a very strange narrative in the sense that it's not usual. The men of Yabesh Gilead fully trusted the messengers who came back from Saul. And this was the determination of the entire nation. And it is a test of the kingdom of Israel. Understand, this is the first time that it was not with God that they are coming out, but with the king, together with God, obviously behind it. But it is with a king, a human king, where they are establishing a kingdom. And they are going against another kingdom of the Ammonites. As a test of faith, verse 11 comes to show us the true colors. Verse 11 says this, the next morning, and understand this, the next morning is not the next morning. This word here is not morning. This word here is the next day, the day after, next day. All right, it's not the next morning. So I just strike that out for now. The next day, Saul banded. This is a military tactic. Saul put the people in 3 companies. The word 3 companies means that they are in 3 groups with 3 heads. All right. So 3 companies are in 3 heads. That is basically what Saul is doing. So Saul is breaking the teams into 3. 1, 2, and 3, each with a head. Each with a head. That is what this means. And they came into the middle. The midst means the middle of the camp at the morning watch. Now, this is important. The camp. Whose camp? The camp of the Ammonites, right? Of the Ammonites. When the morning watch. Now, the morning watch has this phrase, because this morning is struck off because it's not supposed to be there. It is the morning watch, or the how should we say this word here? I think I should introduce you the word. The word here is the night watch of the morning. Night watch literally means the third watch of the military third watch. They have 3 watches at night, and the last one is towards the break of day. The word morning here would be the break of day. The sun is about to rise, and it was still dark. And so this was an ambush to take the Ammonites by surprise. And they came in, and this word is cause to kill. Cause to strike down the Ammonites until the heat of day. Again, this word heat of day is the same word, cham. Because the prediction is by the midday, when the sun is high up. This is cham as in the son of Noah. And by the hot day, when the sun is all the way up, they were destroyed. The people of Yabesh Gilead were rescued. The Ammonites who were not killed were this one who survived. These were the ones who weren't killed. They are the remnants. This is the word for remnants. The ones who didn't die. And so the translator decided to use the word survive. Not wrong, not wrong. But basically, the better word is those who remain and did not die, were scattered. This word means to be dispersed. Dispersed, so that no 2 of them were left together. And this literally gives us a visual imagery that they were all alone by themselves, running all over the place, scattered, and not at Yabesh Gilead. This tells us that by the break of day, they were delivered. And this is the fulfillment. They were saved. They were liberated from the Ammonites. Verse 12. Verse 12 says, then the people said to Shmuel, who is he that said, shall Saul reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death. Now, these are the people who supported Saul. Remember, when we first started, I wanted you to see that there were 2 groups of people. These were the people who supported God's choice. Notice, God doesn't force them. These were the people who supported God's choice of Saul. And there were those, we call them worthless men, men of no use, They were detractors. They didn't respect the choice of God. And so they would say, who is he that says, shall Saul reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death. Meaning, so it will cause them to die. So this is what it means. Put them to death is cause them to die. Because as a detractor, they are going to mete out the execution of the detractors. That's basically what we're getting here. Verse 13. But Saul said, not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has accomplished deliverance in Israel. This is spoken as the king chosen, right? Spoken as the king chosen by God. And this is mercy. So he is displaying the character of God, not just in anger, but in mercy. And he attributes this to God. God is the one that made this salvation. And so salvation belongs to God. That's why you get this phrase. Salvation belongs to God. Although Saul was the king who led in battle, it was God who made it happen. And so the Hebrew people always ascribe, good or bad, to God. And in this case, good. Verse 14. Then Samuel said to the people, come, let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there. Gilgal was the first place they gathered when they crossed the Jordan River. And the idea of renew, this word here is to repair. This word here is to rebuild the kingdom there. What does that mean? It means that when it first started, there was disunity. Why? Because there were detractors, good for nothing men who disregarded God's choice of Saul. And now, after this episode with Nahash the Ammonite, the second thing happened. There is now unity. They all saw that Saul is truly the man chosen by God and acknowledged by Samuel, and without a doubt, with the deliverance of God through Saul, Saul is definitely the king. And so this is what Samuel means to renew or rebuild the kingdom there. When it was there in chapter 10, there was disunity at the end. Now there is unity. They came out as one man. Our final verse is in verse 15. So all the people went to Gilgal, remember, by the eastern shore of the Jordan, the western shore of the Jordan River, the place where they met and congregated after they crossed the Jordan with Joshua. And there all the people is they. Notice, all the people is this word they. They made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. This word here, before the Lord, is to the face of God. And in God's presence, in Gilgal, they made Saul king is a public affair. Everything in the Hebrew context has to be seen, heard, visualized, And so this is a public testimony. And in conclusion, they also offered sacrifices, and the word sacrifices is slaughters, so which means that they would kill animal. For peace offerings, the peace offering is the shalem offering before the Lord. Peace offering means that there is a promise, and as God has fulfilled, they are here to give thanks in conclusion of that deliverance. And finally, there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. Now, I just want to point out this phrase, all the men of Israel. And they were the ones who saw how they had come under Saul, went to Yabesh Gilead, ambushed Nahash the Ammonite and the soldiers, and totally delivered the people of Yabesh Gilead from their hands. And this is a divine victory accorded to God. And they can see that in Saul, God was with him. So they can see God above Saul as king. This was a public testimony of what they made Saul king. It is, I don't think it's very much of a modern day ritual. It's that when they came together and they will probably say pledges like how they did to David, but it is a public spectacle such that no one can deny that Saul is king chosen by God and confirmed in this particular incident at Yabesh Gilead. With this, we come to the end of our session today.